This is our training video on the non-negotiables. So we'll go through each of these and the examples and have a bit of a discussion around those. But our non-negotiables are basically what is expected of every staff member. And there's certainly nothing technical or anything in here, no great in-depth knowledge required. Yeah, we just need to follow processes, be disciplined in our workflow planning, in following those processes, and have the right attitude towards work. So we'll start off with workflow, and we've grouped our non-negotiables into a few different headings. So workflow. So firstly, you are responsible for your own workflow. You have to take responsibility for it. You will be held accountable for it. So that is preparing your workflow plan and your workflow planner correctly, but also sticking to your workflow and keeping jobs moving.
Yeah, and there might be some agendas for your workflow meetings, so make sure you are following the agenda, get into that good habit of going through those checkpoints, making sure everything is on your workflow planner, and meetings are booked or whatever it is you need to do for your day. But get into those good habits and make sure you do it consistently.
So we want to see that all jobs that are in your state are on your workflow planner. So it's really important that you run the right report here. We don't use jobs in your state off the dashboard. You need to go in, run that jobs report and make sure you've picked them all up. But everything that's in your state has to be on your workflow planner, and also other non-related tasks as well. So we will have tasks that we need to do that may not be connected to a job, or there may not be a live job in the system, but we know we need to do it, whether we've received an email or a verbal instruction, or we just know that something needs to be done. That has to be on there as well. We need to make sure we're thorough in getting everything on there so that nothing gets lost in the system and things are getting delivered on time.
And if it is a regular non-related task, like you're doing your workflow planner, just have it as a repeat thing on every day. You know you're going to come in the morning and do it first thing, have it there every day, so it's not lost, but also so you've got that time allowance for your day and you can plan the rest of your day around that. Yeah, so no jobs should be parked or on hold unless manager approval. Now, we've had some in the past that have been put on by the accountants or by admin staff, but they really could have been finished. So we need to run that past your manager first to make sure there is nothing else we can do on that job before we park it or put it on hold. So there might be something that your manager can do to get that done and out the door that you're not sure of. Double check and get that approval before you put it on parked. And then we still need some sort of milestone on those jobs so that we continue to check in on those on a regular period and they don't get lost in the system.
And making sure that all tasks are complete or all components have been completed. So not skipping over things on checklists, you're missing bits and pieces. We need to make sure for the task to be completed that everything that is required is completed so the job can then move on. So we don't want gaps in the workflow planner. We don't want things missed because it becomes a quality control issue then, but also we don't want to miss things that cause a problem for someone else down the track either. So be really thorough with your workflow and make sure that you're completing everything that is required to be done. Not starting another job until you cannot work on the previous one. So this is really aimed at, we don't want someone to have 30 half-finished jobs on their workflow. We need to get jobs finished and get them out the door. So don't go starting a new job if there's existing jobs in the system that you've already worked on that you can continue to work on. And you work on those jobs until you just cannot work on them anymore. So you're right, it's either finished, which means it's moving on to someone else and going out the door, or you've got a meeting booked. So that could be a review meeting, a query meeting. Maybe you just need to make a quick phone call and get a little bit of assistance to keep the thing moving, right? But you can sort of refer back to our Catalyst training and also our communication training as well, to that matter, on making sure that we exhaust all possibilities to getting the solution that we need or getting the help that we need to keep the job moving.
Yeah, we find this is where the biggest inefficiencies come in jobs, why too much time is spent on a job, because you get to a point on a job and either you get a phone call or you get an email and you jump to that next job. There's no need to do that. You can ignore it. We give you permission to finish that job until you cannot do anything else on it anymore. You've either finished it, you've got a query meeting, or you've got a review meeting. But yeah, don't jump at other things just because they pop up as an email or a chat or something. You can ignore them.
Yeah, that's right. And it's your responsibility to be the catalyst. You have to be the one to get this job moving and keep it moving, right? So we don't want to hear, oh, what's happening with this job? I need to book a meeting in with you. Well, you haven't booked the meeting in, right? You can't just let a job sit there until someone asks you about it. It's your responsibility to be the catalyst, keep the job moving, get the answer that you need, talk to the person that you need to talk to, book in the meeting that you need to keep it moving. Whatever it is, you're responsible for keeping that one moving. And just a final point on this one also is the other reason why we want you to work all the way through jobs is because we know when you stop and start jobs, it just chews up time. We stop a job, we start a job. We stop a job and start a job. All of a sudden, the budget on the job, the time budget on the job is just blown out of the water because we've stopped and started so many times. So we don't want that happening. And look, also make sure that jobs that you know are coming up are on your workflow planner. So you can see in the workflow planning training that we've done that you need to be looking ahead. So if you've got regular jobs, like Sarah mentioned before, if you've got things that pop up regularly, they should always be on your workflow planner. If you've got monthly jobs, such as monthly BASs or monthly payroll type jobs, they're always on your workflow planner. They should never leave. You should have next month sitting on there already. Same with quarterly BASs. And also having a look at the unallocated jobs, and you can see what's coming up. Start to plug them in for tomorrow, the next day, next week, in a couple of weeks' time. Just start to map those out and get them all on there so that we've got a complete picture of the workflow that's coming up. We can see who may have too much work on. We can see where bottlenecks are. We can reallocate work to other team members. We can manage the workflow better as a team if everyone's doing their workflow planning correctly.
And this applies to everyone in the office. Admin in the same boat as accountants, as financial planners. You need to see what's coming up, know the big picture, and then if need be, we can reallocate between team members if somebody's got too much coming up on their plate. Admin can see what milestones are coming up in the next week or so. If one person's got too many people to call on one day, we can move those around. But if you don't know and you don't put this in your workflow planner, then we can't manage that workflow for everybody, and then someone might get overwhelmed because they've just got too much on their plate.
And after you've had a meeting, a query meeting or a review meeting or whatever it is, you need to work on that job and move it on. What we don't want is people having a meeting, having a query meeting, getting some answers, but then not working on that job for 2 or 3 days, right? We need to work on it while the knowledge is fresh. So if you've got a meeting booked in about a job, it could be a query meeting, could be a review meeting, could be just some training that you need in order to complete the job. You need to have time allocated after that meeting to actually work on the job and move it on. Not work on the job and then put it down again and do something else. You work on the job to move it on, which could mean we're getting queries out to a client, for example. It could be it's finished and it's going back to the manager to send out to the client. But we need to make sure that we've allocated time in the workflow planner to work on it after our meetings and work on it to a point where we have moved it on. So it's not still a job that's clogged down in your system.
Yeah, and managers should also make sure that they're not accepting multiple review meetings or query meetings from the one person in a row as well. So, but you shouldn't be booking them as well. So make sure you've got plenty of time to finish after you have a query or review meeting to get that job off your plate, whether it's 4 queries or you finish the job and it's for review. You should be able to finish that job and move it on. Now, if it comes up that you've got another review meeting booked in and you haven't quite finished that job, then postpone that next meeting. Don't just jump into the meeting because you've got it booked. Finish the job that you were working on and then have your review meeting later on.
That's right. And it may not always be possible to finish a job after you've had a meeting, but we need to make sure that we've allocated time for it. So you might have a query meeting or a review meeting in an afternoon, for example, and not have enough time left in the rest of the day to finish that job. It should be on your workflow planner for tomorrow as a high priority to finish off, so that we've still got that flow through of the job whilst the knowledge is fresh in everyone's mind. Okay, so that's workflow. So they're our non-negotiables on workflow. This is what we expect from everyone in the organisation when planning your workflow and executing your workflow. Now we move on to communication, and we do have a separate training on communication and methods of communication, etc. But we do also have some non-negotiables around communication that we expect everyone to adhere to. So the first time is that we put notes on the job every time you work on a job, right? So we need to make sure that it's a running history of the job and what everyone's done, but also someone can easily jump into that job, open it up, and see exactly where the job's at. Now, some of the notes can be fairly benign, waiting on this or waiting on that, or etc. But we just need to get that in there as I said, a constant history of the job as it goes through the office.
Yeah, we all need to know where a job's at. It might be admin get a phone call. They can quickly have a look and let a client know, or you're away at some stage and we need to know where a job's at. This is a super important that you have a job. If you put a job back down, if you can't move it on, if you get to the end of the day and you haven't finished it, where were you at on that job? We need to know. And I think this happens a little bit where I see time on a timesheet for a job, but the last job note still says, engagement complete. Well, you've worked on it, you haven't put a job note on, and I get a bit frustrated when that happens. So get in the habit, you do your timesheet, you put a job note on straight away. It's all in the same area in the job. It's really simple to do it all at the same time. But yes, we need to have that visibility on a job to know where they're at all time. Just in case, something happens and you can't come to work for a few weeks, we need to know where that job's at.
That's right, and your job note should say often what needs to happen next. So yes, if you've worked on a job, we don't just want to see a file note saying I worked on the job, right? We need to say that we've done this and here's what has to happen next, right? I've got a meeting booked with the manager on this date, or I've done all this. We still need to reconcile X, Y, and Z, or we still need an answer from the client about this, etc. So a little bit more detail in there. It's a prompt for anyone else who looks at it, but it can be a prompt for yourself as well. When you grab the job tomorrow, you can have a look at it and say, oh, yep, I know exactly where I'm at with this one. Yep. Now, the right communication method for that situation at that point in time, and we go through this a lot in the communication training, but it's really important that we choose the right communication method. There's many, many different ways we can communicate. We need to choose the right one for that situation at that point in time. So don't be scared to jump on a quick Teams call or a quick phone call to ask a question. If it's a very, very quick question, you can get an answer and keep the job moving, then that's exactly what we want. With that, so making sure you're choosing the right communication method and not the wrong one. If you choose the wrong one, it can slow the job down, and which is going to frustrate everyone, and you may not get the answer either that you're after.
Yeah, and team communication to make sure everyone's up to date. So obviously choosing the right form of communication is key, but also making sure that the people that need to know about a certain situation are informed of that, whether it's a quick phone call to members because a job is urgent, or just letting somebody know that something's coming up in the next few days that needs to be taken care of. Make sure the right people know about it. You've got some notes on that as well, but the right form of communication to do that as well. Maybe an email out to 3 people to say this is an urgent job isn't the right way to do it. It's a quick phone call and saying, hey, this is coming up, you're going to have to do this, you're going to have to do this, you're going to have to do this. Everyone knows and everyone's up to date as well.
And sometimes it's multiple forms of communication, because you've still got to do a job note, which is a form of communication. Yes, you might need to talk to someone and let them know it's urgent, and you might follow up with an email to the rest of the team letting them know. So once again, the right communication, it probably should say methods there in a lot of cases, because you may need to use more than one, but it's important that everyone knows what's going on and we're using the correct communication method to keep the job moving as quickly as we possibly can. So sometimes putting a job note on and changing the state is just not going to cut it. That, in some cases, that's just handballing the job down the track, and we haven't actually got a solution. So, yeah, for more detailed discussion on communication, have a look at the communication training video. Now, quality control, obviously very, very important to us. We're dealing with tax, we're dealing with financial planning issues, we're dealing with lots of numbers, we're dealing with people's money. So we need to be accurate with what we're doing, and our quality control is so important. And we expect everyone to take responsibility for the quality of their own work through self-review. Now, first of all, we need to make sure that everyone understands the job or the task before actually starting it. So don't waste time trying to trawl through if you're not sure what you're meant to be doing. So that could be in the form of having a pre-job meeting with someone, or a pre-job discussion with someone, jumping on the phone or on a Teams call saying, hey, what do I need to do on this job? Can you fill me in a little bit? Obviously, tax permanent's an important component of this as well. So is tax permanent complete? We need to read it and have a look at it, but it might be a bit thin on detail. So we might need to have, once again, a discussion with a partner or a manager or someone else in the organisation to fill that out a little bit. Everyone's responsibility for tax permanent and filling that out, but it's a key component to understanding the job before starting. As is having a look at previous work. Is there something else we can go and have a look at? Maybe it's last year's job that we did for them. Having a look there, last year's queries. What information have we got on file to start to get your head around what the job entails?
Yeah, and I think if it's the first time you've done the job, absolutely should be having a look at it, having a quick little meeting on how to tackle it, because, things can change for a client as well. So it might not just be, oh, look at last year and do it exactly the same. That might not be the best method this year. So if you do have a little bit of a meeting, especially if, the tax permanent really isn't giving you enough information on how to tackle it, have that meeting, talk to the manager, and they might be able to just guide you and give you a step-by-step of the best way to tackle it, which might not be the way we did it last year. Doesn't necessarily mean that we have to follow last year. A few clients now are starting to move from, doing QuickBooks, and they're using Xero now. So it might be a completely different way to tackle it. So you really should have a quick chat and have a good look through all the different ways, I guess, like Chris, you just mentioned the tax permanent last year's queries, all the little check boxes that we've got in that work papers document, you should be doing before you even start trying to input data or reconcile data. You should understand it before jumping in and just coding everything, because you might not do it the right way.
Exactly, and particularly if you're new to the organisation, you've never done that job before, or maybe it's a new client that's come on board. We need to be a little bit more thorough in this area, and particularly, obviously having a great understanding before you start the job. Some sort of pre-job discussion with the manager, probably with the partner as well for a new client as well, to make sure, because sometimes it's a bit embarrassing when queries go out and it's sort of like, well, if someone had asked me that, I could have answered it. So we just need to be really, really thorough there. If we're thorough at the front end with jobs, then we spend less time on jobs, we frustrate clients less, and there's less mistakes that get made. So it's so critical that we do the front end as thoroughly as we possibly can.
Yeah, and that includes the manager. Like you said, Chris, talk to the partner, understand the job before you're costing it even, because we want to make sure we're costing the job correctly, and that it goes out priced correctly, so we don't have to go back later and reprice it. So it not just accounts, financial planners there, it's the managers as well. Understand the job, talk to the partner. Look, if tax permanent's empty, you can't even move that job on. You need to get some details on that job.
And take pride in your work. So don't pass rubbish onto someone else or pass mistakes on for someone else to find. I mean, it's embarrassing, and it obviously reflects on I guess your professionalism to a certain extent, but also your self-pride and making sure that you're not passing stuff on for them to find mistakes. So self-reviews are really, really important. So yes, it's important to follow the checklist and do everything thoroughly, but go back and do a self-review before you even pass it on and ask some questions. Nobody in the organisation is going to recheck absolutely every single thing you've done. I mean, if someone has to check absolutely every single thing you've done, then we probably don't need you in the organisation, because someone else, if I've got to check every single thing you've done, I could have just done it myself. All right. So you have to have the attitude that, one, you don't want to be embarrassed by having someone pick up your mistakes, but two, we're not going to check every single thing, and mistakes could end up in the client's hands, right? Which is a disaster in terms of our reputation, but it could cost us money as well. If we caused damage to a client or extra cost to a client, we have to wear that cost.
And this is where I guess you need to make sure that you are having that, I guess, self-discipline to go through the checklist, tick everything off, and make sure that it looks right at the end. Now, if you don't understand something or something is different that you need some training on, you've got to ask for that. You can't just keep continuing to do the work and ignore it or skip over it, hoping that someone will ask you about it at the end of the job. You need to stand up and have that discipline and say, I don't understand, or I need some training on this before the job's finished, because, you know, we don't want to have to go back and redo everything once it's finished because we've picked something up at the end that you said, oh yeah, I was going to ask you about that. It's too late once you finish the job. Got to do it at query stage or review stage.
And if you're unsure of anything at all, you need to raise it. You need to point it out to the reviewer or ask a manager or ask a partner. You can't just let it slip through, and because it could slip through and go out the door, right? You have to raise it. You need to say, hey, I've done this way, but I'm not sure. Can you please check it? Can you please have a look at this for me? That's your responsibility to do that. It's not good enough to be silent and let it go through. If you're unsure, you have to point it out and ask some questions and make sure that it is absolutely correct.
Yeah, look, we've got checklists, we've got work papers, we've got procedures to do things, but they can't cover every single situation on how to do a job. You've still got to have a little bit of that, you know, self-checking of does this look right? This is a new thing that has popped up that wasn't there last year. I'm going to ask the question about it. You know, they're guidelines, work papers and checklists, but you still need to understand the job at the start and then make sure you ask the questions along the way.
Yeah, so just reiterating that point, identifying and raising potential issues. So it could be something on the checklist you don't understand. It could be something you've done, you think you've done it right, but we want to be 100% sure. So just raise it and say, hey, this is what I've done. I did this, I did that. Is that correct? Once again, your responsibility around quality control and self-review. You're obviously following checklists and procedures thoroughly. That probably should go without saying, but we do see a lot where people have skipped over little checklist, or they've ticked it off as done when it wasn't done, or they've ticked it off even though they didn't know what it meant. It has to be done thoroughly. We need to refer to manuals and other resources where required as well. So we need to make sure that everything is getting done correctly. We're not skipping bits, especially bits that are critical. Sometimes on a checklist something can be skipped, but you need to know why it's getting skipped and that it clearly is not applicable in this circumstance. It's not just a matter of skipping over things because you don't understand it. You're too embarrassed to ask. It's your responsibility to get this right.
Yeah, and make sure you do refer to those manuals and other resources if you aren't sure. We do encourage you to research and have a look into things if you're not sure how to do something, so that when you do go to the manager for help, you can say, I've looked here, here and here, and I still don't understand what to do. Could you please help me? So yeah, we've put together those resources with links, with videos, to give some sort of guidance on how to do things. If it's still unclear and you do need some more training or step-by-step help, then you go to your manager, but at least have that attempt to find out how to do things first.
Okay, so moving along to task completion. So yeah, all relevant tasks need to be completed. So just reiterating the points there about the checklist, don't tick something off as done if it is not done. It's extremely dangerous. And if you don't fully know what the task or the step is, then get help. Don't just skip over it. Make sure that we're completing all tasks that need to be done thoroughly and correctly. We want to make sure the right person is doing the right task at that point in time. So we don't want people overreaching here or having to do things that they haven't been trained thoroughly in. So if you feel you need more training, once again, you need to ask questions, but also you need to know when you don't know, and you're either seeking help or maybe that you're not the right person to be doing that task. It needs to be reallocated to another team member to allow that to be done correctly.
And we should not also always just accept the way the checklist says, or the person that on the checklist says to do it, there might be a better person to do it. We've always got to be thinking about our processes, procedures, our technology, the different forms of software that we use, and who's the best person for that job right now. It doesn't mean because someone did it 6 months ago, they have to still be doing it now. We always want to evolve. We always want to make sure that the right person is doing those tasks, to make sure that the other people with expertise in other areas can concentrate on those things.
We need to complete tasks within acceptable time frames. So look, a lot of the things we do have standard turnaround times. It might be 24 hours or 48 hours that we need to get, a pre-commencement done, or get an email out, or things like that. Also, we have milestones that have got specific dates, follow-up phone calls, etc. So we need to make sure that things are getting done with acceptable timeframes. We've got turnaround times on, accounting jobs, for example, financial planning jobs. We want to turn them around in X number of days, book in follow-up meetings. Whatever it is, we all need to be striving towards hitting those acceptable timeframes for our clients.
And it is your responsibility, if you can't meet those timeframes, to speak to your manager and say, hey, I don't know if I can get this done on time. What else can we do? Can someone else do it? Can I put some other work to them? But make sure that we try and meet those timeframes. And yeah, I guess be proactive if you don't think you can get to those times.
That's right, and that comes back to that workflow planning, that we need to know in advance if things aren't going to be done. It's no use raising it the day after it was due and saying, oh, I didn't get it done. If we had known a week in advance, or a few days in advance, yeah, we could have reallocated some work. Maybe someone else could have done it. We could have found a solution as a team. Right, so need to make sure that we're raising those issues as well. And finally, with task completion, using the correct tools and the correct resources. So making sure we're using the right software, using automation where we can, using the right spreadsheets or calculators or whatever it is that we need to do, that we're using the right one. And if you're unsure, ask. Right, we don't go away and reinvent the wheel and maybe come up with some big fancy spreadsheet if we've already got one created, or maybe we've got some software that does it for us. So just making sure that we're using the most efficient way possible to get things done.
Yep, and if others pop up that we want to have a look at that could be better, let's have a look at those as well. We always want to make sure we're using the up-to-date, best technology wherever we can.
And the final section in our non-negotiables is around problem solving and seeking solutions. So look, we expect everyone in the organisation to seek solutions and be a problem solver. So we need to make sure we're trying to unblock roadblocks, get the answer so things can keep moving. But if you do get stuck and genuinely stuck, then you need to stop and get help. Like sitting there and trying to find an answer for 5 hours doesn't help anyone. Staring at the screen, the solution's not going to jump out at you, right? So you need to understand when you are stuck and stop and actually get help. So yes, you need to seek solutions. You need to be a problem solver. You need to try and find the answer. But after a certain period of time, you need to stop and say, oh, I seriously need help here. I need to call someone, or I need to book in some training, or whatever it is. I need to get that help in order to be able to move this one along. As I said, who do you need to talk to get the solution or move that roadblock, making sure that we're clear on that. So, and this is really about being the catalyst in this area. So you can refer back to the being the catalyst training and the chapter that we all read. But that's all about taking responsibility to seek the solutions, problem solve, unblock the roadblocks, get things moving, keep the job moving.
And also flows back into communication again. What's my right method to get that solution and move that job on as quickly as possible?
Okay, so that's our non-negotiables. As I mentioned at the start, we expect every single team member, these are non-negotiables. We're not here to negotiate them. They're not do them if you feel like it or not feel like it. It's a non-negotiable for working in our organisation that we all work towards these and adhere to these. So it's really critical that everyone takes that on board, and obviously it does link in with communication, etc. So you need to make sure you're asking questions, getting training if you need it, if you're not sure, not just sitting there silently hoping that the solution pops up in front of you.